Hello and welcome to another AI for Business live stream from ThoughtBot. My name is Ferdia. I'm a senior product designer here at ThoughtBot, and I'm going to be taking you through this series. We've only got about 3 weeks left at this stage. As we said in past episodes, this series is a little different from our other AI and focus series with Chad. These streams, we're kind of trying to keep it quite light. There's no sort of real heavy technical definitions or coding or anything like that. We're trying to keep each stream quite short, to around 30 minutes or so it'll be nice and short each week. And we're kind of looking at AI from a product perspective or from maybe a less technical perspective than the other streams with Chad. I'm going to be hosting this series each week, and sometimes I've got some of my amazing colleagues that'll call in for a chat. But for this week, it's just going to be myself again. So just to bring you all back up to speed with an overview of the series and what we've covered so far and what we still kind of have left to do. So in previous streams here, we talked about kind of the history of AI and sort of how to harness it. And then we kind of looked at sort of 3 things that AI is really good at and can be really beneficial to incorporate doing right now. So those are cognitive insight, cognitive engagement, and automation. And then in the last stream, we kind of looked at whether or not you should sort of go big or go home with your AI adoption, and whether you should kind of gradually evolve or kind of revolutionize your business with it. If you haven't watched those previous streams, those recordings are all on YouTube, and I recommend checking them out just because they kind of link up a little bit together, and it kind of makes more sense having seen the previous ones. But you can also watch them independently. There should be enough benefit and kind of enough sort of independence in each one, and that you should still get some benefits from each one. So this week and next week, we're going to be looking at basically some of the challenges around implementing AI and how you can potentially overcome those. And then finally, we look at kind of how to roll out a change like this into your organization, and so kind of your implementation strategy. And then finally, just before we jump into today's chat, as we've kind of discussed in each stream so far, or as a bit of a disclaimer, when I say AI for the purpose of this series, it's very much an umbrella term. It is a little bit of a catch-all and it's a little bit loose, but it kind of helps keep things simple basically, and helps us sort of stay focused on the outcomes rather than the technical minutiae. And that is the purpose of this series. So it's a bit general, but we're going to go with that for now, just to keep things simple. Okay, So this week, as I said, we're going to be discussing some of the challenges around adopting AI into your organization or into your product. And first up, we're going to be looking at people. Basically, the largest hurdle to a kind of a successful AI-powered digital transformation or business transformation, it's not broken code, and it's not kind of limited data or missing data or sort of limited budget or anything like that. It's Brian from accounting who still prints his emails, right? It's going to be your people, and at the end of the day, your people have the ability to make or break the adoption of a new technology in any organization, and probably with any technology as well, but definitely with AI would fall into that. So even if you've kind of carefully identified your problem and then your goals, and then you've looked at your processes and where you can kind of add customer value, as we've kind of looked at in previous streams, you're still not set up for success without first considering the people on your team. You're going to need to do that. People generally don't respond well to sort of top-down change. So it's really important that you make your team feel part of the solution and kind of not part of the problem. So today we're going to be kind of going through some of the challenges and maybe recommendations that your business will need to kind of address to ensure that you can reap the benefits of kind of a successful adoption of AI for your company or for your product. So the first thing you want with your transformation is you want it to be vision-led, okay? So any move to kind of incorporate AI into the company should see AI aligned with the company vision and not the other way around, okay? And that's really key. Doing this basically means that AI is going to serve a strategic purpose. So it's helping you reach your goal or your kind of big vision for the company. And it's not just being adopted for its own sake. It's not just being shoehorned in there because it's a fancy new technology or anything like that. And this is really beneficial then for your team of people, because we talked about that kind of vision stuff before with Amazon and how they use AI in that regard. But it's really helpful for your own internal team as well, because they're probably already on board with your company vision, right? That's existed for some time. Probably when they joined the company, they knew what they were getting into. So that's existed for some time. Your team's already on board with that. So then it's less of a leap for them to kind of get on board with your AI strategy if the two are intertwined, rather than just kind of two totally separate things. So yeah, AI should basically be helping you achieve your existing vision and kind of not just adding AI in there for the sake of it. So just try to remember that, because you might face sort of external or potentially even internal pressures to kind of make us feel like we need to invest in a hot new technology or in a new topic. But if it doesn't fit into the company kind of vision, people will ultimately be resistant to its adoption, and it'll become like a real pain and a bit of a drag on resources. So align your use of AI to the company vision, and hopefully the previous streams would have kind of helped set you up to do that, because of the goal and how you like fit it into your process. So everything is based around providing customer value, so it should align. The next thing to consider then is your organizational structure. So according to kind of experts in this area, a sort of flat and flexible and kind of silo-free organization or organizational structure here kind of allows people and AI to work most effectively together. So that means basically you can maximize the benefits of AI then. I'm going to add some links to some of these articles in the video description. I'm not an expert on company structures, but the general kind of consensus is that if it's possible, you should try to shift your organization to a structure where teams are kind of flexible and cross-functional, and where they're set up to kind of tackle maybe specific problems as opposed to kind of having individual roles and responsibilities. Now, obviously, a kind of a big structural shift like that is going to be a major challenge for any organization, particularly for kind of more large and established ones. To do it, to make a change like that, and again, I will link to some articles specifically on this topic in the video description. But to make a change kind of that magnitude, you're going to have to engage with your employees You're going to have to let them know what's happening and why it's happening. And you're going to have to tolerate risk, because there is a risk kind of moving stuff around at that scale. And ideally, then you incentivize kind of the change that you're trying to make. So you're incentivizing cross-functional coordination or innovation or whatever it might be. So look, it's a big change, but it's just the theory here is just trying to set up your company to maximize AI insofar as you can, or to kind of change your structure to get the most out of AI as best you can. Next topic then we have, and we've actually touched on this one quite a lot in the previous streams, and that's kind of this issue of communication, and then how kind of communication, expectations, and kind of transparency are all sort of overlapping and sort of crucial to each other. Again, I've linked here to a Harvard Business Review article, and again, I'll link this in the descriptions. But Harvard Business Review are a top client, so humble brag on that one. But basically in this article, they talk kind of about how sort of top performer companies spend a lot of time communicating and educating their teams. There's some stats in there around that. It's just so their talent understands how machines are making their jobs easier and not obsolete. So that kind of communication piece. And that, it seems like a good common sense kind of thing to do, and that you want to communicate and educate your workforce. And just kind of give an example of that, I guess. If we revisit our Thought Burgers example again, so anyone basically who's been watching these streams knows that Thought Burgers is our kind of delectable AI-powered and entirely fictitious side business. And so we're just using it for example purposes here. But it's a fast food restaurant chain in London, and it's home to kind of the tastiest and most thought-provoking burgers. That's kind of our tagline. Now, way back in the third stream of this series, I think it was, the one about cognitive RPA, we looked at how cognitive RPA could basically be used to automate processes, and then we looked at applying cognitive RPA to our delivery driver scheduling. Okay, so that system could basically automatically and predictively sort of schedule drivers based on changing historic patterns in the data. So this move, basically, as you can see there, it's going to affect several steps in our delivery process. And you can see those there highlighted in green. And because this is affecting quite a large part of our existing process, it'll be really important for us to communicate with our team, say our delivery managers or branch managers or drivers as well, that the automated scheduling of drivers basically isn't going to make their roles redundant. Instead, it should be giving your branch managers and your delivery managers kind of more time to either liaise with their team of drivers, maybe to deal with like customer no-shows. So, a driver arrives out at a location, can't get through to the customer. What should I do? You ring your branch manager and they're kind of giving you instructions so you can deal with those kind of things, and to tackle like the long list of kind of other tasks that's going to fall into their lap as well. So you want to kind of communicate that with them. So it's basically you're trying to let people know that it's a tool or kind of a teammate to help you, but it's not there to kind of replace. So to build trust in AI, basically, it's essential for leaders to communicate that vision transparently. And so again, you need to explain the goal that you're trying to achieve with bringing in AI. And again, following the process that we've looked at in previous streams, that should be pretty clear, but you do need to communicate it to your team. Then you need to communicate to them, how I suppose the changes that you're going to make, first of all, the changes that are going to be involved with this kind of new adoption, how you're going to roll those changes out, and kind of over what timeline you're going to roll them out, and so on. So by kind of explaining all these things to your team in a lot of detail, and it's better to, I suppose, err on the side of over communication rather than under communication. But you want to explain these things to your team. And then this kind of alignment then of expectations should leave employees feeling excited about the kind of upcoming changes rather than sort of resistant to them or nervous about them or kind of daunted by them. And again, this is a challenge for every leadership team. So you need to work on kind of framing these things correctly for your team and the messaging you're going to give to them. And Next up, we've got communication again. So it's just really important to kind of note at this point that transparency and communication, it shouldn't stop after the initial plan is outlined to your employees. Okay, so once you've kind of set your stall out, that's not your job done. This has to be an ongoing process, basically, to ensure your employees and your team are continuously engaged with the changes. So again, if we revisit our thought burgers example, in the fourth stream of this series, we explored how cognitive insights could kind of be used to sort of better triage thought burger delivery orders between branches during rush hours. I don't know if you've seen this one, but some of you might remember it. So basically, it's kind of helping us figure out which orders get sent to which branches for optimal delivery efficiency, and it's kind of basing those decisions based on sort of driver data and maybe the traffic conditions and the kitchen capacity in different branches and the available stock in different branches and so on, right? So lots of factors there are becoming part of that. But if we were to make this change, the order triaging, sort of without communicating the logic of it to our team and continuously communicating that logic to the team, the thought burger branch managers, they're going to want to know why an order is being sent to an alternative branch that isn't theirs, right? So what's the logic behind that decision? What could they do to increase the number of orders that they get sent to their branch? So giving them the visibility on an ongoing basis into those decisions and maybe into other restaurant or other branch performances as well, that would give branch managers better insights into why their branch is either being chosen or not being chosen to fulfill certain orders as they would like. And then if it's a case that they're not getting as many orders as they like, they can hopefully then take steps to improve that, because again, they're seeing the logic behind why those decisions are being made. And from that, they should make some changes. So if this information around like why we're sending orders to different branches isn't clear or it's not accessible on an ongoing basis, thought burgers would then risk alienating a branch, basically. So the branch might start, if they feel like they're not getting enough orders, a branch might start to kind of blame the new triaging system for the issue that is actually maybe something they could solve if they just knew, I suppose, or if they had the power to resolve it themselves. And so that would be kind of a black box system, and they could just, branch managers could just end up blaming the system rather than addressing the problem. But that would be on us at Thought Burgers HQ, because we haven't made it transparent enough for people to understand those. And obviously, if it's not transparent, then you've got a risk of kind of alienating particular branches, or kind of low team morale overall. So basically, the ability to question the decision engages your people in the process and it educates them at the same time. And it could even actually lead, like having people involved in kind of the decision making, could even lead to improvements in your order triaging algorithms as well, because your team could maybe spot mistakes. Because as we discussed previously, these systems aren't infallible. They do make mistakes. And again, it's very hard to spot a mistake if the transparency and the kind of communication around the logic of the decisions isn't being communicated. It's going to be almost impossible to spot those things. And so again, communication is very important up front when you're trying to bring in a new tool like AI into your business, but it's also really important to keep doing it on an ongoing basis, and that's really key. Another core aspect then of a successful adoption of AI is going to be training in your team. So throughout your new kind of technology or your AI rollout, you should be providing training to your team to help them manage the new systems. If you can, try to come up with some incentives for learning and contributing, so to get people on board and willing to kind of to take up the mantle and do some of that training, extra learning. A good thing to do as well is to try to provide some proper documentation or some really good quality documentation, just to make it easier for people to learn in their own time as well. And for AI, it's possibly also worth providing some ethical training as well, and because there's obviously some ethical gray areas in AI adoption, and people might be nervous about seeing AI coming into their business. So yeah, worth providing some ethical training as well. And then kind of if you kind of, I suppose, execute this well with kind of the incentives for learning and the learning materials, and providing those for your team, this can kind of create a little bit of, I suppose, a growth mindset towards personal improvement, and a bit of camaraderie in the team. You know, that you're kind of all in this together, we're all learning together, and we're all kind of taking the next step together. And that can be quite powerful for your organization. So if the team feels like they're kind of being supercharged, then they're going to be more excited about the changes rather than kind of resistant to them. And ultimately, the change you're making should benefit your team. It should be giving them more time to focus on other tasks, and by kind of creating maybe less stressful work environments. Again, going back to our Thought Burgers example, maybe delivery drivers are less stressed trying to do so many deliveries, or maybe the people in the kitchens aren't being overrun with too many orders, that kind of thing. So it should lead to a less stressful environment. It should be a benefit to your team, should be a help to them. So providing the training then that demonstrates those benefits clearly to your team will just make them more excited about the changes rather than kind of scared of them, I guess. And then again, this is something we touched on previously, but in some cases, job displacement will occur. Unfortunately, it's pretty much inevitable when a new tool or technology like this is rolled out. So again, for example, in Thought Burgers, last week we kind of looked at maybe pursuing a sort of a revolutionary approach of using delivery drones to deliver our food. That's kind of your revolutionary approach to food delivery. And if we were to follow that approach at Thought Burgers, we'd ultimately need fewer regular delivery drivers on the ground, right? There's no real way around that. That is ultimately what would happen. But there could be an opportunity then to retrain some of that team. So we might need drone handlers to say complete check or pre-flight checks on the drones, because we obviously don't want them crashing when they're en route. Or maybe even just to attach deliveries to the drones to make sure that the right deliveries are going to the right drones. And just to kind of generally ensure that the fleet is running smoothly. We might even be able to, create a new managerial role, like a director of drones, or a regional director of drones, or whatever it is, who's responsible kind of with managing that fleet. And then in reality, we're also probably going to need some regular delivery drivers still. Say for larger orders that might be too heavy for some of those drones. I don't know what the weight capacity is in the likes of Mana or other kind of delivery drones, but some really large family orders might be too heavy for that. Or if the delivery is going near a no-fly zone, like an airport or like a stadium or an army base or something like that, again, you're going to need some regular delivery drivers to do that. So so we'll still have basically use for that team, but some people might need to move sideways basically to a new one, and kind of providing them that outlet and that training will be really beneficial just to keep up team morale as well. Now, providing kind of training, if you're doing like a big shift like that, it can be quite complex to do at scale. So with that in mind, a sort of phased rollout of a new technology like this, it works well. So rather than going kind of from 0 to 100, try to go from 0 to 25 to 50 to 75 to 100, like that. So basically a phased rollout works well here because it can accommodate the phased training in tandem with it. So if you're rolling things out incrementally and iteratively, you can kind of roll out the training in the same way. And then another benefit of kind of the phased rollout is it kind of allows for your team to take some ownership, ownership over kind of the adoption process. So basically they're getting their opportunity to give feedback, first of all, on the technology, and to kind of dictate a little bit how it's going to be used. And if you give your team the opportunity to kind of tinker with the technology before a final adoption decision is made, it'll definitely ease the transition and kind of help with that adoption. Your team, because they're just going to be more on board, they're going to be more familiar with it, less daunted by it, they've had a chance to play around with it. And your team would probably spot some flaws and maybe ways the system can be improved. And that's great for you, obviously, because your system is going to be better as a result. That's kind of a no-brainer. But if you actually listen to your team's feedback and then you act on it, you're also giving them an even bigger stake then in kind of the new technology, because they've helped to shape it. You know, they'll have that kind of ownership feeling over it. They'll feel like they've got a stake in it, and then they're tied to the success of it as well. They'll want it to succeed because they've had a chance to, you know, to give some feedback and to be part of the, again, part of the solution rather than part of the problem. So they will want it to succeed now that they know that they're kind of an insider, for want of a better word. They've seen it before, before it was fully released, and they got their feedback in, and, you know, their feedback counted for something. And just a side note on this action, I don't know if folks are familiar with Michelangelo's David statue. This is kind of a funny anecdote, I guess, kind of around this theme. But basically, Michelangelo is a Renaissance artist, and he was sculpting this masterpiece kind of in secret. People sort of knew he was working on something huge, but they didn't know exactly what. And the statue was basically commissioned by this patron in Florence. And then when the day comes to kind of do the big reveal to the patron, your man kind of looks at it and inspects it, and he sort of sizes it up and down, and he decides that it's not quite right because he feels the nose is too big. Okay. Now Michelangelo thinks the nose is perfect, but he goes up to the nose and kind of pretends to tap away with the chisel, and he blows some kind of chalk dust from the inside of his hand to make it kind of look like he's taking bits off. And after a couple of minutes of doing this, he steps back down, asks the patron what he thinks of the unchanged nose that he's made no edits to, and your man says it's perfect. Now it's ready. Now, I'm not suggesting you do that in your business, but okay. It's obviously way better to actually act on the feedback from your team, and your team will have good insights when they start using the technology. So do give them that opportunity and do act on it, because they'll obviously see through a trick like this. But the point is basically that people need to feel like they've had the opportunity to have their say before a decision is finalized. So they want their input taken into account to feel part of the solution. So giving people the chance to play with the tech and provide their feedback and then to act on it, unlike Michelangelo, it makes them feel included, gives them some ownership, and gives them a higher stake in it. And we'll be looking at how to do that with sort of phased rollouts and pilot programs in the final stream of this series in a little bit more detail than what we've touched on today. And we'll go into kind of more specifics about the process of implementing your kind of strategy. So keep an eye out for that one, because it feeds kind of back into this stream. And then the final aspect we need to think about for our kind of, or to get our team comfortable with adopting technology for the long haul, is kind of around how we measure success in this context. So rather than kind of defining and measuring the success of a specific project where AI is applied, you might try to define and kind of measure the success of an organizational change as a whole. Okay, and so like it's a bigger shift. To do this, your team is probably going to need to come up with a new set of kind of unique metrics, and these would depend. I suppose they'd be tailored specifically to your company and to what you're trying to do. But the aim of these metrics would be to kind of to address basically changes in behaviors or in processes sort of deep within the business. So like a key metric to track could be the speed with which new ideas are kind of go from or are transformed from kind of idea to a frontline tool. Okay, so that's something you could be looking at. How quickly are we taking ideas to actually kind of useful tools, or maybe you kind of create like a kind of a digital maturity index to kind of track how many processes have been automated, something like that. These metrics that sort of try to track an organizational mindset shift rather than just a specific project. And if you can figure out how to track them in your specific case, you get a good idea as to whether your organization is really embracing the change or the adoption of AI or whether it's not. So trying to measure success is always beneficial, but it is tricky when you're trying to measure it at kind of this larger scale, and it needs to be quite tailored to your specific goals and to your specific organization. But it's worth having to think about, are there new metrics here, creative metrics that we could be tracking to define whether we're doing a good job on this or not. So basically, the bottom line from today is that people can make or break your company's adoption of AI. to get your team on board rather than having them resistant to the changes. There's a few things you can do, as we talked about. So firstly, you need to align your use of AI with the company vision, because your team's already bought into that vision. So don't have the other way around. Don't try to shoehorn it in there. Try to align it to the existing company vision. You need to be transparent with your team, and to keep those two-way kind of lines of communication open continuously, even after the initial sort of phase of heavy communication around why you're doing these changes. It needs to be a continuous process. So you need to be constantly communicating and keeping that transparency open. You need to give your team some ownership as well and say over the technology. So give them the opportunity to shape it. And you can do this kind of by starting out with pilot projects and phase rollouts and so on. And that just makes your team feel like they're part of the solution rather than part of the problem, and they have a higher stake in the success of the adoption. You then need to provide the necessary training to your team. And again, this can be done on a continuous basis. It's not a one and done approach. If you're continuously providing it there, you can kind of cause that, I suppose, that mindset shift in the company to be on board with the changes, but also that kind of growth mindset that we constantly want to learn and kind of improve. And then if it's possible in your organization, try to adjust maybe your company structures to sort of capitalize on the powers of AI, and maybe try to create some metrics to measure the success of those changes at kind of the organizational level rather than at project level. And again, you want to share those metrics and share those goals and the progress towards them with your team as a whole. So if you kind of follow this approach, you will hopefully have a much better chance that your team will want the kind of AI project or the AI rollout that you're planning to succeed, rather than to kind of be resistant to it. So that's it for this week, folks. We're just about on time. Hope this is beneficial. Next week, we'll be looking at some more challenges to your AI rollout, specifically around kind of societal and legal and maybe ethical considerations. And then we'll be wrapping up in the final stream after that around implementation and around rolling out your technology. So hope this was helpful, folks. We'll be back next week, same time next Friday, and we will chat to you then. Thanks very much for joining.